He had nothing left. But one request. Just one night. She had every reason to say no. But the light in her hand became the light in his life. Welcome to Fact Life HHD. This is a story about second chances.
3 days earlier, he'd still had a car. 2 days earlier, he'd still had hope. Now, after getting cheated out of his last paycheck by a construction boss who vanished overnight, Ethan had nothing except $42, a dead phone, and nowhere to go. The storm worsened. Lightning flashed across the empty fields. That's when he saw the farmhouse. A warm yellow light glowed through the windows. Smoke curled from the chimney. Beside the house stood an old red barn. Ethan hesitated at the gate. He hated asking for help, but he hated freezing even more. He walked to the porch and knocked softly. No answer. He knocked again. After a moment, the door creaked open. An elderly woman stood there wearing a gray sweater and holding an oil lantern. Her silver hair was tied back neatly, and her tired blue eyes studied him carefully. "Yes?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you. My car broke down a few towns back, and I've been walking since yesterday. I don't need much. I was wondering if maybe I could sleep in your barn tonight." The woman looked past him at the rain, then back at his soaked clothes. "You eaten?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "I'm okay. That wasn't my question." He lowered his eyes. "No, ma'am." For a few seconds, she said nothing. Then she stepped aside. "You're not sleeping in the barn," she said quietly. "Come inside before you catch pneumonia." Ethan froze. "Oh no, I couldn't impose. Eddie, you already knocked. That means life pushed you far enough." She pointed toward the kitchen. "Sit." The house smelled like chicken soup and fresh bread. It smelled like the kind of home Ethan hadn't walked into since his mother died 6 years earlier. The woman moved slowly but confidently around the kitchen, placing another bowl on the table. "I'm Margaret," she said. "Ethan. You running from something, Ethan?" He gave a tired laugh. At this point, mostly bad luck. Margaret didn't smile. Bad luck follows people who stop believing they deserve better. That sentence sat heavily in the room. Ethan stared into the steam rising from the soup. "I used to believe things would work out," he admitted, "but every time I get close, something falls apart." Margaret finally sat across from him. "Well," she said, tearing bread in half, "sometimes life removes the wrong things before it brings the right ones." Outside, thunder rattled the windows. Inside, for the first time in days, Ethan felt warm. Later that night, Margaret showed him a small guest room near the stairs. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said again. "Yes," she replied softly. "I do." Before closing the door, she added, "My husband used to bring strangers home during storms. Drove me crazy." A faint smile appeared on her face. "But he always said, kindness is the only thing people carry to the grave that still matters." Then she shut the door. Ethan lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Something about the house felt frozen in time. On the hallway wall, he'd noticed old photographs. One showed Margaret beside a tall farmer with kind eyes. Another showed a young man in military uniform. In every picture after that, the young man disappeared. Only Margaret remained. The next morning, Ethan woke early and found Margaret outside struggling to move heavy feed bags near the barn. "You should have woken me," he said, hurrying over. "And you should probably stop acting like the world owes you nothing," she replied. Together they carried the bags inside. The barn was old but sturdy. Horses once lived there, though now only empty stalls remained. "You manage all this alone?" Ethan asked. "For the last 11 years. No family nearby?" Margaret paused. "My son was killed in Afghanistan." Ethan's hand stopped moving. "I'm sorry. My husband passed 3 winters later." She brushed dust from her gloves. "After that, it's mostly been me in the silence." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan noticed part of the barn roof sagging badly. "That beam's gonna collapse eventually," he said. Margaret sighed. "I know. Haven't had the money to fix it." Ethan looked up at the structure carefully. Years of construction work kicked in instantly. "I can repair it." "With what money?" "I didn't say hire someone," he replied. "I said I can fix it." Margaret studied him suspiciously. "You'd work for free?" Ethan shrugged. "You fed me." For the first time since he arrived, Margaret smiled fully. It changed her whole face. The repair took 3 days. Ethan worked from sunrise until dark, using old lumber, rusted tools, and pure determination. Margaret cooked every meal. At dinner, they talked more each night, about grief, about regret, about loneliness. Margaret learned Ethan once dreamed of opening his own woodworking business, but gave up after repeated failures. Ethan learned Margaret played piano every Sunday until arthritis stiffened her hands. Slowly, the silence inside the house disappeared. On the 4th evening, a pickup truck pulled into the driveway. A tall man stepped out. Margaret stiffened instantly. Ethan noticed. "Who is that?" "My brother-in-law," she muttered coldly. The man entered without knocking. "Well," he said, removing his hat, "looks like you finally hired help." His eyes narrowed at Ethan. Margaret's voice turned sharp. "What do you want, Harold?" Harold glanced around the aging house. "I came about the property." Margaret said nothing. Harold sighed dramatically. "You can't maintain this place forever. Sell it to me before taxes bury you." "I already told you no." "You're alone, Margaret." "I'm not helpless." Harold leaned closer. "You will be after winter." Ethan saw Margaret's hands trembling slightly. Something about the exchange felt cruel, practiced. Harold noticed the repaired barn roof through the window. "You paid someone for that?" he scoffed. "No," Ethan answered calmly. "Just helping out." Harold smirked. "That's cute, but charity doesn't save farms." Then he left. The truck disappeared down the road. Margaret quietly sat at the table afterward, staring into nothing. "He's been trying to buy this land for years," she whispered. "Lowball offers, pressure tactics. Thinks eventually I'll break." "Will you?" She looked around the house slowly. "My husband built this place with his own hands." Ethan nodded. "Then don't let him take it." The next morning, Ethan prepared to leave. His backpack sat near the door. Margaret noticed immediately. "You found somewhere to go?" "Not exactly. Then why are you leaving?" Ethan avoided her eyes. "Because eventually, kindness turns into burden." Margaret walked to the kitchen silently. She returned holding an old metal box. Inside were folded papers. She handed them to him. "What's this?" "Business licenses," she said. "My husband's." Ethan frowned. He used to build custom furniture in that barn before farming took over. She pointed outside. "He always believed good craftsmanship never dies." Ethan looked confused. Margaret took a slow breath. "The town 40 minutes from here has a fall market every month. People pay ridiculous prices for handmade furniture now." She looked directly at him. "You said that was your dream, wasn't it?" Ethan stared at the papers. "You barely know me." "No," she said softly, "but I know broken people when I see them." Tears burned unexpectedly behind Ethan's eyes. Nobody had believed in him for years, not like this. Margaret smiled gently. "You asked for a barn." She pointed toward the workshop. "But maybe God sent you there for a reason." 6 months later, the old barn was alive again. Fresh wood shavings covered the floor. Handcrafted tables and chairs lined the walls. People drove from neighboring counties to buy Ethan's furniture. A painted sign outside now read, "Walker and Hayes Woodworks." Hayes was Margaret's late husband's name. Ethan insisted on adding it. Every evening, Margaret sat on the porch drinking tea while Ethan worked inside the barn workshop. And every night, no matter how busy things became, there were always two places set at the dinner table. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness doesn't just save a person for a night. Sometimes it gives them back their entire future.